There is something unusual about human behavior. We often assume that people avoid truth because they don't understand it, or because they are misinformed, or because they haven't been exposed to it yet. But in reality, that is only part of the story, because sometimes people avoid truth even when they already understand it, even when it is visible, even when it is obvious, even when it would help them. So the real question becomes, why do humans avoid certain truths, even when awareness is available? And the answer is not simple, but it is deeply human. We tend to think of truth as information, something you either know or you don't. But psychologically, truth is not just information. Truth is also emotional weight, identity pressure, perceived consequence, and personal cost. Two people can receive the exact same truth and experience completely different internal responses, not because one understands it better, but because it affects their internal stability differently. So truth is not only about accuracy, it is about what it does to the person receiving it. And this is where avoidance begins, not as rejection, but as regulation. One of the most misunderstood aspects of human behavior is this: avoidance is not always denial. Sometimes it is protection. When a truth creates more emotional pressure than a person feels capable of handling, the mind does something very subtle. It doesn't always reject the truth. It simply reduces contact with it. This can look like distraction, rationalization, shifting focus, emotional detachment, delayed engagement. Not because the truth is unimportant, but because the nervous system is trying to maintain stability. So in many cases, what we call ignorance is actually temporary emotional capacity limits. Not refusal, not defiance, capacity. Now there is another layer that becomes important. Humans don't just respond to truth, they respond to what truth means for action. If a truth feels solvable, actionable, reversible, or meaningful, people tend to engage with it. But if a truth feels irreversible, overwhelming, or beyond personal control, people often disengage emotionally. Not because they don't care, but because the mind asks a very practical question: if I fully accept this, what can I do with it? If the answer feels like nothing, the system reduces emotional investment. This is where avoidance becomes a kind of internal efficiency, not moral, not ideological, functional. This brings us to a deeper distinction. Truth is not the same as agency. Truth describes reality. Agency describes what can be done within it. Humans are far more willing to engage with truth when they believe, I still have influence here. But when truth removes perceived agency, the emotional system often shifts toward distancing, reframing, or narrowing focus. Not because people are avoiding reality, but because they are protecting their ability to function inside it. So the real tension is not truth versus ignorance. It is truth versus perceived ability to act meaningfully. When you understand this pattern, human behavior becomes much less mysterious, because you begin to see avoidance is not random, denial is not always rejection, silence is not always ignorance. It is often a response to internal balance. And this applies everywhere: personal relationships, social systems, politics, daily decision-making, even self-reflection. People are constantly negotiating between what is true and what they can emotionally integrate. So when we ask, why do humans avoid certain truths? The answer is not a weakness, and it is not a flaw. It is a reflection of something more fundamental. We are not just systems that process information. We are systems that live inside the consequences of information. So truth is not just something we see. It is something we must learn how to carry. And perhaps the most important insight is this: avoidance is not always the absence of awareness. Sometimes it is the management of it. And when awareness becomes paired with stability, something changes, not instantly, but gradually. Because the goal is not to force truth, it is to increase the capacity to hold it. And that changes everything.